Imagine failing a bunch of times at an endeavor and going, let's double down on that endeavor. That's the kind of mentality that's going on over at Warner Brothers. The executives want to focus more on live services moving forward, and yet the losses that they've incurred from live services, I mean, they're tremendous. Genuinely, especially after the most recent failure from Multiverses. This is a game that you may recall launched all the way back in 2022. It very quickly plummeted in player numbers, and then they kind of closed the game down for a bit and relaunched it in 2024. It saw a great number of players initially, and then those numbers plummeted again. And that's kind of what I presumed would happen, because they just didn't make great strides from the open beta early access stages of the game. If anything, they released the game in a worse state, a lot of people would argue, with less features or just a less complete game overall. And the end result of this is that Warner Brothers has incurred another $100 million hit to revenue in its game's business. Now, the use of the word another is there for a reason. You may recall that Warner Brothers also launched Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, and that, ladies and gentlemen, as of May of 2024, contributed to a $200 million hit to Warner Brothers revenue in the gaming division. Suicide Squad is still going, by the way, but to very little fanfare. If you look at Steam numbers for that game right now, you'll find concurrent player numbers in the low triple digits. This live service is as good as dead, and there is no clear sign of how poorly a live service performed. Then when you look at a chart like this and can't pinpoint exactly when a season released, because usually a season results in a spike of players who then check the content out and then they peter out over time before the next season. The seasons of this game made such little impact that it's still all kind of a flat line, not something that can be sustained for the long term. They are planning to release a season 4, but I imagine that beyond that, they got to consider plans to wrap things up, because this is going to cost the company. I'm frankly surprised that the game has survived this long and that plans haven't been cut short. Though apparently Warner Brothers has significantly scaled back plans for Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League following the disastrous launch. According to Jason Schreier, there is some bare bones support for the game, but definitely not as much as it originally planned. So yeah, that's a $200 million hit from Suicide Squad. And then on top of that, we have Multiverses' $100 million hit for a grand total of $300 million. This is by Warner Brothers' own admission. We took another $100 million plus impairment due to the underwhelming releases, primarily Multiverses this quarter, bringing total write-down year-to-date to over $300 million in our games business, a key factor in this year's studio profit decline. I'm very curious to see if the tune has changed surrounding this statement from March of 2024, when Warner Brothers expressed their aim to increase focus on free-to-play and live service games, because disappointments like Suicide Squad make the big budget business very volatile, but live service games themselves are volatile, and Suicide Squad itself is a live service, so this statement is a bit contradictory. They're looking at Suicide Squad's failure as a AAA live service and saying we want to lean more in that direction. They apparently want to lean more into franchises like Mortal Kombat, Game of Thrones, Harry Potter, and DC. But no matter how you put it, these games from those franchises are going to be expensive to make, and a free-to-play model is a risky proposition. Makes games more accessible, but if it doesn't catch fire and if it just doesn't monetize well because players aren't engaged enough, which is what happened with Multiverses, then you get a flop that results in a $100 million loss. Multiverses, for those who don't know, is free to play, and with such a massive decline in player numbers, there's just no way that the monetization machine is churning enough for this game to be worth maintaining and for it not to incur further losses. So yeah, I suspect this game is ultimately headed towards the fate of deletion. Now, speaking of deletion, you know what should be deleted? Your personal information from being obtained by nefarious entities. Which brings us to the sponsor of today's video, DeleteMe, which is a subscription service dedicated to helping keep your personal information private and safe. Data brokers are constantly out there trying to profit off of selling your personal data to nefarious actors, so it is more important than ever to be proactive about your digital footprint, and that's where DeleteMe comes in. With this service, in one fell swoop, you can delete your personal information from search results and hundreds of data broker websites. Everything from your name, age, past and present addresses, photos, email, phone numbers, relatives, social media, occupation, marital status, property value, you name it. Information that could be used in shady ways. I didn't realize just how public my data was until I saw my first report from DeleteMe detailing just how many data broker websites had my personal information. And as you know, I am a public figure, so things like being the potential target of harassment, doxing, scams, identity theft, stalking, you name it, are more of a concern for me. So DeleteMe coming in and doing a big sweep on my personal data came as a big relief, and it can be that for a lot of folks as well, I'm sure. I also have the security of knowing that DeleteMe is constantly active, monitoring sites and removing data as needed, and providing privacy reports every 3 months to keep me in the know about all that stuff. You can even make your own custom requests to have your information removed from specific sources by DeleteMe's experts. So if digital privacy is a top priority for you, you can protect your data with DeleteMe by using my link, joindeleteme.com/Yong20, and my code YONG20 to get 20% off at checkout, with family plans available as well. You can also find all of this in the description and comment section below. Now, we all know what happened with Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. It was just a very bland, generic, and not well executed live service, looter shooter experience that just took a property like Suicide Squad that could have had so much personality and uniqueness with the variety of characters and just kind of made it the most run-of-the-mill, like, third-person shooter. It was just terribly conceptualized in terms of what the potential of Suicide Squad could have been. And then what happened with Multiverses? Well, I mean, it tried to be a Super Smash Brothers-like, but it was just worse in every aspect. The fact that the servers were so consistently unstable or just flat-out bad certainly didn't help matters, combined with just the jankiness of the game, with hitboxes that didn't feel quite right. Certain movesets felt like they were just overpowered. The balancing wasn't done right. But most fatal of all for Multiverses was just how the cadence of content and feature and character releases was just so slow to practically non-existent for months on end, which killed the momentum, the initial momentum that the game had, which is what eventually led to its initial shutdown, as reported here on March of 2023. The initial plan for this game was to transition smoothly from early access and beta into the final launch, but instead they shut down the game and essentially like try to rebuild it or overhaul it in some aspects. But then it finally launched, and what we saw was that there were so many negative changes from the beta, or omissions from the beta, including, full-fledged modes, but also just aspects of gameplay, aspects of monetization and whatnot, that just made it a worse experience across the board. I don't know how you ship a worse game in the 1.0 release than the beta period, which is when you're supposed to be testing out the flaws, taking feedback into consideration, and implementing that stuff to make a better game. But then we learned, based on what the game director of Multiverses tweeted here, that the game was essentially rushed out to launch after the beta shutdown, stating here, many of these features are currently implemented and are in testing, and we had planned, but were left out due to time, as we had to rebuild every screen and feature again to support our new netcode and Unreal Engine 5 switch. I mean, I sympathize with that aspect of things, but the game should have been delayed. This is just admission that the game was rushed and that Warner Brothers was willing to push out an incomplete product. And when people saw that at launch, they decided, screw this, I have just better things to play, more complete experiences to partake in this realm of live services, where I, as a human being, only have so much time and so much money, and I can only invest that time and money in one or two major live services at a time, because these essentially become full-fledged jobs, given the amount of grind required to unlock the desirable aspects of those games. And yes, another element that killed the game was just how aggressive monetization was and how hard it was to unlock characters and rewards like cosmetics and you name it, the battle passes, and just how long things took, and the reward system that people criticized, aside from people making calculations for how long it'd take to unlock certain characters if you just didn't pay up front, there's also elements like just you not getting rewarded for playing. They essentially made it so that you can only make progress by completing challenges instead of just through playing the game, a mistake that Halo Infinite also made during its launch period, which did not go particularly well. And the fact that certain challenges require you to have certain characters that either take a ridiculous amount of grind to unlock or a lot of money that you gotta shell out to unlock, like the Joker, was just insult to injury. So yeah, lack of respect for the customers combined with just a worse launch than the beta. I mean, not only do we have this Reddit post right here, but this one as well, highlighting all of the modes, all of the features, all of the conveniences and quality of life elements that are missing in the final game. And you get an experience that is akin to that meme of the dude like running into the fridge to see if there's anything good to eat, and then he just and then he just like walks out. It's basically that. That initial momentum is so important for a live service, and when you trip over yourself so hard, like Multiverses did at launch, you get a free-to-play game that not enough people play for the development costs and the maintenance costs to be worthwhile, leading to this kind of situation where you lose $100 million on top of the $200 million that you lost from your other live service failures. So Warner Brothers, maybe take this as a sign that this is not the way to go and that this is not what you specialize in. And maybe you should focus on those single player experiences like, I don't know, Hogwarts Legacy. That did pretty well for you, and for some reason your inclination is to lean into the genre of games that has caused great losses for you as a company. It just doesn't make any sense. Now, this was said back in March of 2024. It is now November of 2024. Hopefully, behind the scenes and up top, the mentality behind that has changed. The reason Hogwarts Legacy succeeded was because the identity of the Harry Potter franchise could be felt throughout that game, and the game that was made was appropriate for that IP. You know, didn't become this weird live service shooter or whatever where you, I don't know, loot wands and shit. Like, that just doesn't make sense, in the same way that it doesn't make sense for the Suicide Squad heroes to have guns instead of using their unique special abilities. And, like, that's what people wanted. But instead you went for the most generic vanilla thing to try to appeal to the masses, to as many people as possible, to try and make this $1 billion revenue maker or whatever, but in turn you ended up appealing to no one. And with Multiverses, the ideas were right, but the execution was poor. The rushing out of an incomplete product ultimately doomed it. And so maybe just stop doing all of that and make more stuff like Hogwarts Legacy. Those types of experiences that we miss as players, the ones where you just make a simple transaction of buying the game and you get a full product that is just a video game tailor-made to the identity of the IP, and that just makes you feel like you have been transported into that world and isn't gamified and monetized to hell in a way that just takes you out. Well, at the very least, that's one man's take, and I suppose only time will tell whether plans have shifted behind the scenes for Warner Brothers after consecutive failures of live services. But in the meantime, let me know in the comments below what your thoughts and opinions are on recent losses incurred by Warner Brothers and their recent game releases. And to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.